Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar in partnership with jobs.ac.uk and the British Academy. So thanks to them for inviting me to talk to you today. So today we'll be delving into some of the challenges faced by early career researchers and providing some strategies for navigating these challenges. My name's Dr. Mhairi Towler and I'll be your guide through the session today. A few bits of housekeeping first. You can put your questions in the Q&A box. It's a speech bubble with a question mark inside, and there will be some time at the end for me to answer them. We've also had questions sent in ahead of time, which I will answer for you at the end of the webinar, and subtitles will be added to the recorded version that will be sent on afterwards. So here's some background information about myself. I have a BSc in biochemistry and a PhD in molecular and cell biology. And while I was a postdoc at the University of Dundee, I carried out a postgraduate certificate in teaching and learning in higher education. And as part of that, I had to address how to make learning more engaging for students. So I thought using animation was one way to do this, and eventually decided to retrain in animation in order to set up a science animation company that helped with science communication. So I founded that business, Vivomotion, in 2012, and have since developed a series of training workshops to help researchers like yourselves to present their research visually. 2 years after launching the business, I had twins, so I understand what it's like to juggle family life and a career, so that's something that we'll discuss later in today's session. This year I launched a podcast called Opportunities in Science, where I interview inspiring individuals working in different job roles after studying for a science degree. So throughout both my career in academia and in business, I've learned a lot of tools and strategies that I'd like to share with you today that address some of the challenges that you might be facing. So first of all, we have to define what some of the challenges are that you might face as you progress in your academic career. So I'd like you to contribute here. So if you could put something into the chat box, that would be great, thank you. So something that you think is a challenge that you're facing, and that would be appreciated. So just put something in the chat box just now and I'll have a look. What challenges are you facing? So Rob's saying self-confidence. Thanks, Rob. Job insecurity, having to move around, finding a job, lack of funding, time management, combining heavy teaching load with research and always feeling behind, funding, high admin load, hard to network, remaining motivated, lack of funding, planning a career. Yep, so there's loads of things going in there. Imposter syndrome, we're going to talk about that one, Jennifer. So that's great, thank you. So as we can see, there are a myriad of different challenges that you'll face as an ECR. And today we've picked out a few to cover. However, we will have a look at what's been entered into the chat box here in case there's something that would crop up for a further webinar session, for example. Okay, so the topics that we've chosen to focus on today are listed here. And these are based on feedback that we've had from the early career researcher community. So the first one is imposter syndrome, which is linked to building confidence, how to build networks and find out about events that you should attend. A very important one is how to find funding for your research. And finally, time management, which is also linked to related to preventing burnout. So I'm going to go into each of these in more detail, and equally if anyone wants to contribute their own thoughts or ideas or strategies that you've come across into the chat box that can help others here today, that would be really welcome, because any way that we can help each other out, the better. So first of all, how do we overcome imposter syndrome? So firstly, what is imposter syndrome? It's a phrase that many of you might have heard, but for those of you who are not aware of imposter syndrome or haven't heard the term before, here's a definition of it. It's the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So have you ever said to yourself, I don't know what I'm doing here? any moment now, someone's going to find out I'm not up to this job. I feel like a fraud. So if you have had any of those thoughts, you're amongst 70% of people who suffer from imposter syndrome. And it can get in the way of our confidence and result in us second guessing ourselves. So it's a good language tool to talk about our feelings, but none of us are really imposters, I would say. So here are some coping mechanisms for overcoming imposter syndrome. The first one is embrace your status. So you need to remember that you're in a job for a reason. You are the expert on a topic and you've gone through a selection process and been interviewed. You've been chosen for the role, so you need to embrace your status. So Viv Groskop talks about the concept of happy high status in her podcast, How to Own the Room. And it's a really good podcast to listen to if you want any tips on presenting and building confidence. But the point I want to make with this is that you have to remember that you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you weren't qualified or experienced enough to do it. So own it. The next one is visualization. So visualization is also a good technique to practice to overcome the thoughts that you can't do something. No matter what context you're feeling insecure about, whether it's a talk you have to give, a meeting with your manager, or a poster presentation, you can employ visualization to help you through it. Visualize the scenario and visualize the outcome you want to happen. If we rehearse things in our heads before we do them, it will go as we plan. And this is what Olympic athletes do to rehearse their races ahead of time. A third strategy to reassure yourself is to talk to your peers about how they're feeling. And you'll be surprised to find that you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling like a fraud, and that many people experience this. So you can work on building your self-belief by also writing down your wins each week. So on a Friday afternoon, take 10 minutes to reflect on the week and what you've achieved that week. And over time, this activity, actually seeing your achievements written in black and white, consolidates the successes you've had and helps to build your self-belief. And finally, maybe you don't even have imposter syndrome. So it's good to question these kind of buzzwords that get, bandied around in different circles. Maybe you don't have imposter syndrome. There's a good podcast questioning this by Lauren Curry, OBE, and I'll put the link to this in at the end. I've got a slide at the end with all the links where I've got this information from. But she says the phrase itself is problematic because it just encourages people to blame themselves for deep structural unfairness. So imposter syndrome is linked to lack of confidence. So let's now explore confidence and how we can build our own confidence. We're going to get interactive here again. So I've got some questions written down here, and we can put the answers in the chat box. So have you ever turned down opportunities due to a lack of confidence? So you can put a Y for yes or an N for no in the chat box. Have you ever turned down an opportunity because you're feeling, oh, I don't have enough confidence to do that talk, etc. So there's a few yeses. Katie saying no, Miriam saying yes, Russell saying yes. Okay, so quite a few, I would say more yeses than nos. So yeah, people have turned down opportunities due to lack of confidence. Who do you think of when you think of a confident individual, and what qualities do they have that make them appear confident? So again, can you put something in the chat box for me? Who do you think of when you think of a confident person? Who springs to mind? Any examples? So Miriam saying a professor in the field. Nicola Sturgeon, good one. My line manager. Anybody else? Any other examples? Male colleagues, Daniela. Other early career researchers on Twitter who seem ultra successful easily as they share their, some senior professors, many consultant surgeons, TED speakers. Yeah, so quite a few examples spring to mind there. And again, We'll look at what these mean a bit later on, but certainly when we're looking at things on social media, again, remember there's like a filter there in terms of what people put on social media. We're always seeing the good and not all the rubbish things that happen in that person's life. What would you do if you felt more confident? So would it be apply for a new job, or ask for a promotion, or ask to speak at a conference, or start a new initiative within your own department? Maybe there's something that you would do if you had more confidence. And then, is it having an impact on your career? So again, can you put a Y for yes or an N for no if you are feeling it's impacting your career, having a lack of confidence? So yes, some people are feeling it's impacting how they're progressing. So let's look at some situations now where lack of confidence might be affecting you. These are some different scenarios. So in a committee meeting, for example, you might feel intimidated if there are more senior members of staff there, and you might feel it difficult to voice your own opinion or get that moment to get your point across. You might feel anxious about interviews for funding, where you don't know who you will be interviewed by and that your work is under scrutiny. So this might provoke feelings of self-doubt to creep in. And then another scenario where you might lack confidence is during presentations within your department, or lectures at a conference, or lectures to students, for example, or when you're giving a lecture for a first time. You might suffer from nerves and anxiety beforehand, and imposter syndrome, and perhaps feel underprepared for an event. So these are some scenarios which might affect you, if you're lacking in confidence. But let's look at some solutions around building confidence so that we can deal with these situations when they arise. So I'm going to go into each of these topics in more detail. There's 3 here. Firstly, using our physical body and presence to convey confidence. Secondly, strategies for dealing with nerves. And thirdly, preparation, which I would argue is the most important of these in order to give us confidence in any given situation. So I just wanted to mention here the visual, this cloak of confidence. I was once at a training session about developing confidence where we were actually given a physical cloak to put on and asked to walk across the room so that the cloak flowed out behind us. And we were told that if we wanted to convey confidence in the future, to imagine ourselves wearing this cloak of confidence when entering a room or walking up to a podium to speak. And this exercise has never left me, honestly. I often recall it when I'm walking into a room to network, or, for example, going up to a stage to speak. It's just a tip if you want to give it a go, because actually the physical feeling of wearing a cloak and letting it flow out behind you makes you stand tall and have confidence in yourself. So try that one out if you get a chance. Okay, so the first one of those was using the physical body and posture to control nerves and build confidence. And this can be very effective. So here we can employ some skills that actually actors learn at drama school. So when I was younger, I did a lot of musical theatre, and when I was on stage, we were always told to look up and project our voice to the back of the room. So taking up more space literally gives you authority. So uncross your legs and arms. Don't be sitting with your arms folded, huddled over. Hold your head up. Ground yourself through your feet. So steady yourself and center yourself through your feet. So imagine roots growing down through the floor. Power poses are great for getting you psyched up for giving a talk, for example, but there is some science behind it. So standing like Wonder Woman in private, if possible, it increases the levels of testosterone in your body and decreases the stress hormone cortisol. So if you want to know more about this, then watch the TED Talk Fake It Till You Make It by Amy Cuddy, and she explains the science behind it. Use intentional gestures if you're using your hands. Tony Blair, the politician, was famous for this in his speeches. Keep your head still if possible, and don't play with your hair, shuffle your feet, or jangle coins in your pocket. I also use breathing exercises to control my voice when presenting or when I sing in a choir. Breathing exercises can slow down adrenaline and the fight or flight response that we feel when we're on stage, whether that's a virtual stage or a real one. And finally, the tone of voice that you use. Did you know, for example, that Margaret Thatcher changed her voice to make it sound lower and therefore more commanding? Think about what kind of voice you want to come out of your mouth when you speak. So I have a friend who thinks she sounds like a lamb bleating when she's nervous. But breathing and posture can help your voice sound controlled and calm when you speak, whether that's in a meeting, presenting, a lecture, or giving a talk. So, dealing with nerves in relation to confidence. So, this is a big one, as we can get ourselves very worked up and anxious before an event. And getting nervous is normal before a talk or an event. But if you tell yourself that nerves equals excitement, that can also help. It also shows that you care about what it is that you're going to do and that you've given it some thought. So we wouldn't be human if we didn't get nervous before events. And it's a way of our bodies coping with a more stressful situation. It can also sharpen our minds. The problem comes when we become over anxious. To the point where we're being sick or whatever before an event. So keeping a lid on the nerves can be done with a few coping mechanisms, and some of them are listed on this slide. So the first one again is breathing exercises. So I've mentioned these in relation to controlling your voice, but they're also good in the moment. But we can also practice meditation on a regular basis to practice what it's like to be and feel relaxed. So the Headspace app is a good one to get started with meditation if you've not done it before. Some people find it very difficult to switch off, and it does take practice to master, but it's worth it for good mental health. Taking some physical exercise can also burn off excess adrenaline. A brisk walk, a run, or a swim, whatever it is that you prefer to do when you're exercising. Visualization, again, is a great technique, as mentioned earlier, and it can help us to rehearse for an event. So actors wouldn't go on stage without rehearsing. So if we rehearse in our minds, this can help us on the day of an important meeting or event. And the tapping solution is a good app if you suffer from anxiety. So it literally involves tapping certain points on your body to help release stress and anxiety. And finally, journaling is also a good activity to start if you don't already. So getting your thoughts out of your head and onto paper can help your mind feel calmer. It also allows you to clarify your thoughts and feelings and thereby gaining valuable self-knowledge, identifying what it is that you might need. So prepare. This, I think, is the key to mastering nerves and confidence preparation. So practice, practice, practice. If you're doing a talk, for example, you must rehearse for a talk or event. If possible, in the room you will do it in. Practice delivery for timing, so you know it will fit into the time slot you've been given. And as a rule of thumb, I like to give 1 minute per slide. If you can find out about what the computer setup will be ahead of time, that's also helpful. Do you have to send the slides ahead of time? Will you have to bring a USB stick with your slides on and transfer them onto the organiser's computer? For example, think about all these technical things that you might have that might crop up. It's also a good idea to bring your own laptop along with an adapter cable and a power cord just in case. Will you be able to see the presenter view in PowerPoint if that's what you're using? So sometimes you'll also be asked to wear a microphone, so make sure you have a pocket that you can slip the box into. And also, if you're wearing a dress, then maybe be aware that the mic wire might have to go up from the bottom. So best to wear separate top and bottoms so it's easier to feed the mic wire in. Or wear a jacket with a lapel for the mic to clip onto. If you're using a handheld mic, obviously don't hold it too close to your mouth or you'll get feedback. And you may also have to hold a laser pointer and move the slides forward. So there's a lot to think about to coordinate with your hands whilst also thinking about what you want to say. So having rehearsed it ahead of time is really paramount. Knowing who's going to be there can also help you prepare. So if you're giving a talk, who is your audience? Are they experts or non-experts? And what jargon or acronyms do you need to remove if it's a general audience that you're speaking to? So think about your audience at all times when you're preparing. And if it's a meeting, try to get a list of attendees ahead of time if possible, and then you know who you want to speak to. If you haven't been to a committee meeting before or given talks before, then try to get some training. So universities all have professional development courses now where you can get training on this. And if there's some skill you think you're lacking in, then sign up for some training on it, and that can also build your confidence. Finally, always have water handy in case your mouth dries up, and a pen and paper to take down important notes. Okay. So that's me covered the kind of first area, which is looking at imposter syndrome and building confidence. I'd now like to move on to networking and events and how to build your network and how you can leverage your network for your career progression. So your network is going to be one of the most important tools you have in progressing through your career. People who know about you and know about the wonderful work you do will be how you get ahead in your career. And people are generally very generous with their time if you are asking for help and advice. This is a quote from the Harvard Business Review, and it says, "One of the biggest assets in anyone's life is a generous network." But you should also be prepared to give back to people in your network if you can. So don't just ask for something. Stay in touch with people just for the purpose of staying in touch. So if there's people that you've not been in touch with for a while in your network, ask them for a virtual coffee, for example. And it's really easy these days for people to have like a 15-minute break and a quick catch up. But what does networking mean? Well, networking is the building and maintaining of relationships with a wide range of individuals, groups, or institutions who share common interests, goals, or expertise. And really, there are lots and lots of different researcher networks out there as well. So I'm going to highlight some of them for you. Dr. Nicola Palmer recently wrote for an article for Vitae about researcher networks, and she said researcher networks exist in a multitude of forms at a range of scales with a variety of purposes and membership size. She said there exists new and established researcher networks, institutionally based networks, external multi-organisational networks, networks at the departmental level, and subject area specific and interdisciplinary networks, and finally, networks of different sizes and demographics. So some examples that I've been involved with in the past include a postdoc association within the School of Life Sciences at the University of Dundee. So that was one within our school. And then at a more national level, I was involved with the Young Academy Scotland through the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And this one was really nice because it was a mixture of academics and business people. So people from different walks of life coming together to address societal issues. So there's so many different types of networks that you can get involved in. And I would suggest to you just to have a look around to see if there's subject specific ones within your own institution, and then ones nationally that you can get involved with. Another example is the Early Career Researcher Network of the British Academy, who we're partnering for today. So welcome to those of you who are part of this network. The Academy aims for the network to be a research-led and inclusive humanities and social sciences network, accessible to all researchers regardless of their funding source or background. This will ultimately be a UK-wide network tailored to researchers at postdoctoral level in the humanities and social sciences disciplines. So we do have a contact. Peris Thuo, her contact is on the last slide today. So if you are interested in joining this network, then you can contact Peris after today. But this network's still in its infancy, so it's only a year old. So they are still, growing and finding out about what's needed for researcher networks. So it'd be an interesting one to join if you're in those disciplines. You can also contribute to the Researcher Network's Working Group Toolbox. I've got a link for this as well. I might put that into the chat just now. And this one is through Vitae. And again, they're trying to sort of figure out how they can help researchers in terms of developing different networks. So moving on to networking characteristics now. It's people-centered. It's all about people, and it's all about forming relationships. It requires purposeful, planned operations. It's not about using people, but using the information that they give you. It's about asking people for their help and advice, and most people are usually very happy to offer this and help in some way if they can. So with networking, importantly, it's who knows about you that's important. And it's not always about, just asking. It's about profiling yourself as well. So why should you network? Well, it helps you build relationships within your organisation, which might result in an invitation to speak at a conference. It's definitely important if you're thinking of changing your career and you're looking for your next job. It's a good way to find new partners to collaborate with, and also for seeking moral support from others who might be at a similar career stage to you. And it may lead to new opportunities in general. So remember that networking must be planned to bring about the best results. So how should we go about creating that plan? So first of all, you need to know what your goals are in terms of your network. Is it to speak at a conference? Is it to get a promotion or join a committee? By identifying what your goals are, we can ask what information we need to accomplish these goals and ask who do we know who knows this information. Once we have this information, we can then take the steps that are required to accomplish your goals. Here are some other strategies for building your network and raising your profile. So if you don't already, then you should start to use social media to promote what you do. LinkedIn is a great professional network. I use this one a lot to talk about what I'm doing in my work and also just to make new connections. Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are also good. You might want to create your own website for blogs, podcasts and videos, etc. As I've said before, keep in touch with previous contacts and nurture your network. So don't just be asking people, getting in touch with them after years and saying, oh, can you help me with this? You need to keep in touch on a regular basis. Join committees, societies and associations and sign up to their newsletters to keep up to date with their news and what's going on in their certain areas. Mapping your contacts is a good exercise and then file it away. And then when you're looking for someone who's an expert on a particular area, you can consult the map and see who you know and who you can contact to ask for help. And then finally, attending conferences and events in your field is a great way to get to know who's working in your area, who are the high flyers, who are the ones that you want to connect with, etc. Okay. Once at a conference or an event, you need to engage on Twitter, if possible, with comments and thoughts. So sometimes at conferences, the Twitter feed is up on a screen for all to see. So it's a good way to get visibility. People will be thinking, who's that tweeting? Who's that making an intelligent comment or asking a question? If you can apply to speak or present a poster at a conference, then that's great. Don't wait for an invitation. Try to contact the conference organisers and say, I'd like to give a talk about my work. Can I get a slot? And even if it's a short talk, it's a great way to get profile at a conference. So giving a talk is the best way to be seen and get your work noticed. You might want to ask to give a talk at another university. So maybe you know some colleagues at another university. So you can ask, can I come and visit and I'll give a talk when I'm doing my visit. This will expand your chances of collaboration. If you can, get a list of attendees before you go to an event. So this allows you to target the people that you're interested in meeting. And you can always contact them on LinkedIn beforehand and say, I'm looking forward to this event next week. I see that you're going and it'd be nice to have a chat when we're there. Don't just stick with your own group. The reason that I put this in is that I used to go to conferences with the lab that I worked in. There was a lot of postdocs and PhD students. And because we were quite a large number, we used to just stick together. We didn't really spread ourselves out and network like we should. So try to make the most of these opportunities at conferences because people are coming from all over the world to meet up. So it's a great chance to make new connections. And then ask questions if you're given the opportunity to do this. So this also gets you noticed during different sessions at a conference. So how to find out about conferences and events? So which ones should you go to? Well, I found when I was in the research environment that people would generally just talk about the conferences that were coming up. So I would ask senior colleagues, what ones should we attend? Is there a chance to speak at them? Again, ask your peers. You can always ask on social media if people know of any events related to your topic. Signing up for newsletters as well from societies that are in your area of research. There'll be promotions about events coming up in the newsletters. And then you can also just do your own research online to find out about what is coming up in your area. Finding funding. So what fellowships exist, what grants can you apply for, and where on earth do you start with this? So this is a big one. I've put a few links here. Again, these links will be on the last slide, but there's funding sources at the British Academy there. Liverpool Hope University has got a nice long list of different funding that people can apply for. UK Research and Innovation, and also grant funding and schemes guidance from the Wellcome Trust. But again, it's up to you to sort of do your own research on this. And I would just start by asking your senior colleagues in your department, what grants have you applied for? What grants should I apply for? And start looking around in that respect. So even within these researcher networks that we've been talking about, you can ask those questions. Okay, so that's funding. What about time management? So this was one that somebody put in at the beginning, that they wanted to find out more about managing their time, because obviously as academics you become very stretched. You're doing lectures, you're doing grant writing, you're writing papers, you're doing all sorts of things, and there's so many pools on your time. So you might be in the situation where you're saying, I never have time to do the tasks I want. I always do what everyone else wants. I procrastinate. I'm always interrupted. I work too hard and I seem to go nowhere. I can't organise and I'm completely overwhelmed. So I think these are some of the sort of phrases that some of you might be experiencing in terms of time management. So some strategies to cope with time management. So basically prioritizing tasks, I would say, is really important in terms of managing your time. I would say I learned this when I became a mum and I had to suddenly juggle, the needs of my children with the needs of my job. I had to prioritize what was important to be done, what task had to be done first. So there's a book called Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, and this is a great one for getting rid of procrastination as well, because basically if you've got like lots of tasks on your list, your to-do list, you look at the one that's the biggest and the most horrible task and you tackle that one first. And once you've got that one out the way, the other ones seem easy. So the other ones might just be reply to an email by such and such. But maybe the first one is, write a paper. Who knows? So prioritizing your tasks and making lists, I think, is really a really good time management skill. There's also people might have heard of this book by Covey. It's one of the secrets of successful people or something, and he has this time management matrix where he puts tasks into 4 categories. So they're either urgent, not urgent, important, not important. But they can be urgent and important, and it gets very complicated. But I actually think by the time that you've taken to categorize things into all these 4 categories, that you've spent more time doing that than actually getting on with your tasks. So I prefer just a simple list, a priority list. Okay. Some more time management strategies: divide large tasks into smaller pieces. Some sort of manageable bite-sized chunks are easier to accomplish. Set yourself some deadlines. So maybe you've got a grant deadline coming up and it's, Friday the 30th of September. However, you want to get it done ahead of time. So you maybe give yourself a deadline the day before which then gives you a bit of leeway. So I always set my deadlines like a little bit earlier than the actual deadline. Reward yourself. So whatever is a nice reward for you, give yourself that treat when you complete the piece of work. So maybe you buy yourself something new, you go for a nice coffee, treat yourself to a nice meal, whatever it is, reward yourself. You need to give yourself a pat on the back for completing a piece of work. And then delegation. If you can delegate, if you're the head of a team, then learn to trust your team to do what you've asked them. So, and here's Laura's putting in, Laura Gill, thank you here. She's put in, Oliver Burkeman has a great book on time management, 4,000 weeks, which is also great for encouraging acceptance that it's the nature of a mortal being that you can't get everything done, and should prioritise what's really important to you. Yeah, thank you, Laura. That looks like a good reference there. So other people have been putting things in the chat as well. So thanks for that. We will review it at the end as well. So a few other things, managing your time is really important. And if you want to avoid, especially if you want to avoid the next topic, which is burnout, but avoid interruptions. So don't answer the phone if you're working, close your office doors sometimes. If you don't want to be interrupted, turn off your email and phone notifications. So this is a big distraction for me. I quite often just glance at my phone. I don't even know why. It's just like a reaction. Sometimes you just look at your phone and then you see there's all these notifications, and then suddenly you go down this whole Instagram scroll and you've been distracted for 10 minutes. So if you want to get your piece of work done, put those distractions to the side. And then dedicate time to respond to emails. So don't have your email notifications on all the time. Just say, okay, between the time of 9 and 9:30 in the morning, I'm going to do emails, and after that, I'm going to move on to my to-do list. And then in the afternoon, you can do it again, because those emails, if somebody sent it one day, they're not expecting an immediate response that day, unless it's like super, super urgent, in which case they're probably knocking your office door down. So yeah, just dedicate that time to respond to emails, and don't have the emails pinging all the time, because then that's a distraction, just like your phone. Learn to say no. So do you need a meeting, or will an email do? I have a colleague who quite often asks me for a meeting, and actually we don't need a meeting. And then in a meeting you start rambling on and talking about other things that are not important. So it just takes up time. So you see if you can manage with an email. And then create a daily to-do list. So list 10 items, and if you finish, you can add more. And check them off when done, because that's a real sense of satisfaction that you've accomplished something. If there's items on your list that haven't been done, then ask why. Are they really important? Do they really need to be done? Can they be shelved completely off your list? So yeah, question things. So, managing our time, as I said, is really important if we want to prevent burnout. And burnout is kind of, it is becoming more common in the academic world, just because people are stretched in all directions. But let's first have a look at some of the signs of burnout. So exhaustion is one. So always feeling tired, feeling overwhelmed, not knowing where to start, feeling numb to any positivity. So nothing excites you anymore. The usual support mechanisms that you would employ don't work. You might have low creativity, you might have low patience, you're grumpy, you still feel demotivated even after a holiday. Physical manifestations of stress might be starting to show, and the sort of caring responsibilities, parenting and work can all mount up, to create this horrible, sense of burnout. So these are some of the signs to watch out for. But again, some of these signs can be related to other, things. So don't, you might just need to speak to somebody about it, perhaps your doctor. So the importance of mental health is just so important. And we were discussing just before we came on to do the webinar today, that how when I did my PhD, which was over 20 years ago now, mental health wasn't even on the agenda. It wasn't noticed, or it wasn't, people weren't aware of it as a thing. But its relation to overall health is so important. So is there a place that you can seek refuge at work if you are feeling that overwhelm and you're just like, oh, this is just too much? Where can you escape at work? Is there a garden outside that you can go and sit in just for half an hour just to have a breather? Or is there a dedicated space for just time out, just to kind of relax? So have a think about that. Where can you escape to at work? This is a quote by C.S. Lewis. It says, mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but it is more common and also more hard to bear. And we don't want people to be carrying a great weight around with them at all. So, if you are feeling those feelings that we've discussed in that slide about burnout, you need to seek help and don't suffer on your own. So talk to your doctor. You might want to make some lifestyle changes. Maybe it's just incorporating some exercise into your daily routine. Reach out to other people. So talk to your colleagues. So don't just bottle it up. Don't hide away. Let people know how you're feeling, and you'll be surprised actually then they might start to open up to you as well. And then seek more mental health information. So there is universities now do have counsellors that can help with this, and lots of tips on their websites as well for dealing with the sense of overwhelm that you might feel as an academic. So I wanted to say as well, there's a new webinar coming in October. I think it's October the 10th. I've got a link to it in one of my slides, and that's focusing on mental health and well-being. So again, through jobs.ac.uk. So you might want to sign up for that one for more tips on this side of things. So in summary, I've talked about imposter syndrome, whether or not we actually have imposter syndrome, and how we can build confidence to kind of navigate the feelings of imposter syndrome. We've looked at networking and events and finding funding, and how all of these things, networking, can help us to look for funding sources, etc., and progress in our careers. I've talked about some time management strategies with you. There are hundreds of time management strategies out there on the internet. If there's something on my list that you don't like or doesn't suit you, you can have a look on the internet, and there's lots and lots of different strategies. And then how these time management strategies can help with preventing burnout. Most importantly, I want to give yourself permission to enjoy your research and to maintain your well-being, and also take care of yourself. So for additional content, a recording of this webinar will be available on jobs.ac.uk, and you will be emailed a link with the recording when it's been published. There are also more career resources available on their website and at the British Academy Researcher Network. Follow jobs.ac.uk and the British Academy on social media. Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook they are on. And as I said, there's this webinar on mental health and wellbeing on the 10th of October. So you can sign up for that one if you want to find out more about support for your mental health and wellbeing. These are links for reference, and the slides can be accessed after as well. I'll send the slides to jobs.ac.uk. So now we have time for some Q&A. So I'm just going to stop sharing my slides for a second and bring up some questions that we had ahead of time. And I'm going to go through these, and then if there's some more questions in the chat box in the Q&A, then I'll have a look at those as well. Okay, so the first question that we had submitted ahead of time was, how can researchers stay motivated and confident when applying for jobs but keep facing rejection and fail to secure spots in competitive positions? So my answer to this is to try not to take it personally. There may have been an internal candidate lined up for the role, which is quite often the case, and the job still has to be advertised anyway. So it's a foregone conclusion. So it's not a reflection of your potential to do the job. Try to seek some feedback from the interviewers, but you also might want to speak to your senior colleagues in your own institution to have a look at your CV and maybe ask for a mock interview to see if there's some areas that you could make improvements on. I'd like to just flag up a couple of people who work in this area, and I think they're really good for this. One of them is Laurie McPherson. She's a career coach. So I'll put her a link to her website in the chat box. And another one is Lucia Juarez, and she works specifically with academics. And so yeah, she's really good for that as well. I'm just going to see if there's any questions in the Q&A. I can't see any questions just yet, so I'll keep going with the ones that were sent ahead of time. So the next one was, how can you approach someone to ask them to be your mentor, or if they're interested in your research group? So my answer to this one was that many institutions now have formal mentoring programs. So sign up to join those. I've had many mentors through this route myself, and usually the mentor is from a different discipline, but they can offer you sound advice. If there's someone specific that you want to ask to be your mentor, then see if you can rendezvous at a conference, try to find them at the coffee break, and politely ask if they would be interested in mentoring you. And a bit of flattery goes a long way here. So tell them you've always followed their research and admire the way they do their research, etc., and wonder if they would be willing to mentor you. And most people are willing to help with this. You could also send them an email and ask for a virtual coffee to seek their advice. Alternatively, you don't have to actually label it as a formal mentoring relationship. As such, you might just want to seek advice on a particular topic. So this can then start a relationship which you can revisit in the future if you want further advice. So that's what I would say to that question. The next one is, as an early career researcher, are there ways to approach funding or grants to be successful? So I would say to this that yes, there is probably a certain formula to follow, and it comes with practice. So the best advice I can give you here is to, again, seek advice from senior colleagues, to read over any funding applications that you've put together and get their feedback. You can also ask them for grants that they've sent in previously to see what sort of structure they've carried out when they're applying for grants and funding. And if there are people you know who are sitting on funding panels, ask them what they're looking for in successful applications. So that would be my advice for that one. The next question is funding for PhD programs dependent on age? Can you be denied scholarship because you're approaching age 50, for example? So I don't think so, but it might depend on the funding body. There might be limitations on fellowship applications based on how many years since you've completed your PhD. So yeah, there might be some restrictions there, but that shouldn't be based on your age. The next question, do you have any tips on how to avoid procrastination? So my answer to this is just do it. Whatever the task is you need to start, then set yourself a timer and begin. So you maybe want to work on it for 25 minutes, then take a 10-minute break and repeat. So this is called the Pomodoro technique, and it's a good one just to get yourself started on a task. Also, breaking a large task down into smaller pieces, as I said earlier, would help. And additionally, setting false deadlines can incentivize you to get going. But yeah, there's procrastination, like I do procrastinate, I have to say, and sometimes it's just a deadline looming that makes me get going on a task. So I think setting false deadlines is quite a good one. Is there a way to manage the increasing demands of academia? So this is kind of a huge question, because obviously in academia there's just so many different things that you're expected to do. What you might want to do is discuss your responsibilities with your line manager, and try to protect the time that you have by not overcommitting to extra tasks. So when I said about joining committees and whatnot, try to be selective with those, and choose the ones that are going to somehow help you get ahead with your career. Delegation to other people in your group, if possible, if you're the head of the group. And there's a book called The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey by Ken Blanchard. And again, this one is about delegation and getting things off your to-do list and onto somebody else's to-do list. So again, those are sort of time management strategies. And then the last question that we've been submitted ahead of time is, can you give your thoughts and advice on the pressures of job insecurity and navigating short-term contracts in research and academia? So what I would say here is that there will always be another opportunity for you, because you're a highly skilled individual, and there will be another job out there for you. So try not to worry about it. I also think when you start a new contract, maybe it's for 3 years, let's say, right at the beginning, you should already be making a strategy for what is your next job. When you become self-employed, like I did when I moved out of academia and started my own business, you realise actually that a 3-year contract is quite a reassuring place to be. So don't try not to fret, because you're highly qualified and there will be other opportunities for you. And sometimes it might just take a little while to get them. But if you do your networking and you're planning properly, then your next position should usually be lined up fairly soon. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look in the chat box now in the Q&A to see if there are any other questions. So, so one from Sophie West. When failing to get an academic job, how would you go about getting feedback on why you were unsuccessful? So I would ask the interview panel directly for feedback, like, just send them an email, say, obviously I'm disappointed I didn't get the role. However, can you give me some feedback as to why? So this actually happened to me not that long ago. And they sent me some very specific feedback, and basically I was lacking experience in a particular area where other candidates had had that experience. So they should provide feedback for you, and especially if you email them directly. It can come through the HR department. But for that job that I'm speaking about, I wasn't even informed that I hadn't got the job. So I had to actually approach them and say, not heard anything yet, can you please let me know? And I obviously, because I hadn't heard anything for a couple of weeks, I assumed I hadn't got it, but I thought it was a bit poor show that I hadn't actually been informed that I hadn't got it. So I was, within my rights to ask for feedback. So that's the answer to your one, Sophie. And then Ludovica has said, hi, thanks for your presentation. You emphasised the importance of preparation. I also hear that women especially over-prepare. Any insights on finding the right balance as part of time management? Yeah, so this is one of those things that women do, Ludovica, and I would again have a look at Lauren Curry. She has a good website, and she also has really good Instagram posts. You can join her community. She has so many insights on this area about, things that women do. And yeah, we can over prepare, but I think, I don't know, I'm still a believer that, preparation is key in terms of, coming across well at an event, giving a talk. And generally, I think the more prepared, the better. And yeah, I'm not sure about this over preparation. I think possibly men just try and get away with less, that's all. But it doesn't make them look any better. If that helps, if that makes sense. Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? I'm trying to see if they're in the Q&A or the chat box. Where is my chat box going? I can see the Q&A box. I'm just having a look down, scrolling down. I don't think there's any other questions in here. Oh, how can I get into publications from Niru? So if you want to become an author on a publication, obviously you have to contribute some way to the research, and it works in different ways in different disciplines. So obviously my experience is in the science world, although I have a bit of experience in the art world as well. Again, this is something that you can just ask people. So you can look at the editors of journals or publications that you're interested in writing for, and you can just approach them and say, would you accept an article on such and such? So again, don't wait to be invited to, submit an article. One of the things that I did, or one of the strategies that I did when I was a scientist, because if research isn't always going along as fast as you like and you're not getting all your first author publications, you might want to suggest to your line manager to write a review of the literature. So literature reviews are also great publications to have, and that way you can also be a first author publication on them. So initiate a conversation with colleagues about putting together a literature review. So that's one strategy as well. Okay, there's a few hands up, but I think you have to put your questions into the Q&A box if possible. And I think Lorna's put one in. We'd love to hear your insights on the challenge of retaining women early career researchers, attracting diverse talent, planning of parental leave, and IP for ECRs, and the random distribution of uni equity across the UK. Okay. So Lorna, thank you for putting those suggestions in for future topics. There is actually something about retaining talent that was discussed at the recent VTI conference. I don't know if you follow the VTI conference, but they had quite a good Twitter feed talking about all the different things. And also, actually, I had a link. I'm going to just have a look because I was just looking at it this morning. This one was actually about, I'll just share my screen again. So this link was actually about the wellbeing and mental health for researchers, but they also talk about retaining talent, etc. as well. So that's something that you might want to have a look at if you get a chance, because they just had their conference, I think it was last week, and yeah, there was lots of things that they discussed that we're discussing here today. So you're getting up-to-date information from what's going on in the sector in terms of supporting researchers as well. Okay, so I think I've just got my last slide now, which has our contacts for jobs.ac.uk. So Kirsty Bonham, and she will be sending you out the link to the recording. Peris Thuo from the British Academy, and she's running the Early Career Researcher Network, so she can answer questions about that. And then this is my email here. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And if you have any questions after today, please do send me them. I'm quite happy to answer any questions if you want to send them through by email. So it just remains for me to thank everybody for attending today, and also all the contributions you've made in the chat box, which we will definitely look at after we've logged out and see if there's some topics of relevance for you for the future. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye for now.